Okay, Chairman.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the March 23rd Sedgwick County Commission staff meeting. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Tom Stoltz, County Manager.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. We have several items today for staff discussion. We'll start off. Glenda has a couple of advisory board appointments that she needs to make in the Corrections Department. She'll start us off. Then we'll go to Lindsay, who will walk us through the analysis of the price of government document that we talked about briefly at the budget workshop. Then we have a vaccine update from Tim, the usual weekly presentation from him, and then Tanya's going to talk about some communications efforts with vaccinations. The landscape is shifting a little bit out there. We need to really begin to communicate and motivate people to think about taking the vaccine. And then finally, Mike and Akeem and Justin will all try to tag team some legislative items and talk about what's going on legislatively this week. So with that, Glenda, if you'd start us off, please.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good
Morning,
morning,
Glenda.
Commissioners and County Manager and team. So I have 2 vacancies on my adult advisory board. One is a renewal. Her name's Kelly Grant. And I would like to recommend that we reappoint her for another term. Kelly's done an excellent job on the board, and she wants to continue to serve, and I interviewed her, and she did a great job. So I would like to recommend her for a reappointment. The other is a vacancy that we had, and I interviewed Richard Vargas. Richard applied the last time but wasn't chosen for one of the positions, and he's the only other applicant. He's done a great job. He wants to be on the board, and my recommendation is we appoint him. So.
Okay. Anybody have any questions?
So this is for the adult. What is the name of this again?
Adult. We call it the CAB, Community Advisory Board.
Okay. So I received an email that somebody was having some issues.
Yes.
Applying for the Community Corrections Advisory Board.
That would be this one.
Board. Okay.
And I also got that email,
Okay.
And so Brenda will get a hold of her and let her know how to get in and apply for that. We have another vacancy that LaShonda Garnes vacated and resigned from both boards. So that should be open right now for another application.
Okay. So she will be able to apply for that?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Awesome.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Glenda, don't see any other questions.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
Thank
Glenda,
you.
is this for the April 7th board then for appointment? Have you set this for an agenda yet?
No.
Okay, very good. We'll probably set it for April 7th, Commission.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. Have a good day.
Thank you. You too.
Okay, next item.
Lindsay.
Lindsay, are you wearing all dark because of the tough game last night?
No, and that was like one of the worst games we've ever experienced.
It
Thanks
was
so
the
much
worst.
for rubbing salt in that wound.
I just as
I went to
I
bed.
said-
I went to bed about 10:30
Okay, all right.
because I couldn't watch it anymore. So
Okay, all right.
thanks so much, sir.
I
Starting us off on the right foot there.
I just thought it was your funeral clothes or something. So anyway,
Well,
okay, back to business. Thank you.
you're
You're welcome.
this one is enjoying that way too much. I will find a way to return the favor
Yes,
at some
I'm sure
point,
you
sir.
will. I'm sure you will.
Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into this. We're not going to spend a ton of time on price of government this morning because after your budget workshop, I think a couple of you had asked to actually see the details behind price of government and the computation, and so I have sent around our very detailed spreadsheet showing actual revenues by line back to basically 1972, as well as personal income and population. So all of that information is already in your email, and I'm happy to send that around. But to talk about what this actually is. So price of government is an index that basically says how much of a community's resources are being put toward governmental services. And so there's a book that was written many years ago and updated again. And basically the idea is, how do you manage when you're basically in a state of constant fiscal crisis? That is what generated the rationale behind trying to understand this information. So what it does is it basically takes the amount of personal income. So how much do we all earn in our community each year? And it puts that relative to the amount of revenues coming into the government. And so what this chart shows you here, and I'll make it a little bigger. Sorry, my old eyes are not doing so well anymore. Okay, so what you can see is the blue line here shows you basically what the 25-year average of the county's price of government is. Again, taking our resources relative to the amount of spending or support that the government needs. So you can see that we are and have been, really since the recession hit, we have been close to around 85 cents or 8.85 cents basically. So it's cents per dollar, which is a really hard thing to wrap your mind around, but we'll get to a slide later that will help frame that a little. So that is where we sit today. Now, how do we actually calculate it? And this is where I said I think we can put some context to this. We take the revenues that we receive from our community. So when it says non-governmental, that means we don't take any grant money. We don't into calculations here. We don't take into account federal awards. CARES would not be considered in this, for example, because that money would have been money that went to the federal government, and so the federal government would include that in their price of government calculation, if that makes sense. So while GDP would be a better measure because that's output, it's not, that type of information at a county level is not easy to get, and certainly when we do get it, it tends to be about 2 years behind. And so that's not a good way for us to measure it. So this is simply the best way we can for local or state government. So we would take our revenues, which you can see in 2020 across all operating funds, we had about $238.4 million worth of non-governmental revenues, again, meaning money that did not come from a government, divided by our community's personal income of $27.9 billion. And so when we take that into account and we put it relative to essentially a cent, we're at 0.85 cents per $1 of personal income for our community. That's the computation. So why does this matter? Why do we care? Again, because this is a fair way for any government, very small or very large, to be able to say, here's the measure of how much of your resources are going to support your level of service. And what they have found, if you have the opportunity to read the book, is that really it can vary from community to community. Some communities have very high amounts, especially maybe if you're running a utility. Some communities may have lower figures, but it's all about the balance and what our citizens are willing to pay. What the correlation is that they note in this book is that the lower it gets, the more dissatisfied people can be with their level of service. And the higher it gets, people are concerned about the level of taxes or the level of fees that they're having to pay their government. So it's always going to be a balancing act. What they have found is that typically 1 cent is, at least for counties, is kind of a good standard. And so we are at 0.85. And so, certainly we have heard maybe during past budget hearings about concerns about certain types of services, maybe aging services or maybe mental health services. So that may be where some of that tension can come from. But on the other side, you have to be really careful to balance for your community the level of resource that they're comfortable with putting forward. So the final slide that we'll talk about is this one. Again, it's just an objective way of putting our information into perspective. It does not take into account, though, those this last year that are beyond our